Welcome everybody to our Gardiner Chess video series. My name is Andrew Fitzpatrick and today we are going to look at a game called the Opera Box game. Now this was played back in 1858 by Paul Morphy, who is going to be white, and he was actually playing against two players at the same time. He was playing the Duke of Brunswick and Count Isouard. And the reason why it got its name, the Opera Box game, is because they were actually at the opera watching that and playing chess at the same time. This is a very instructive game. It's going to cover a broad range of themes, but the idea is we can learn some different bits and pieces from it, and then of course we can go and look at some of the other videos that are being produced and also chesskid.com to learn everything in a bit more detail. So white starts off with this move here, pawn to e4 to start off with, taking a stake in the center of the board. Black responds, pawn to e5, knight f3. So immediately white puts pressure on this pawn. Black responds by putting this pawn up here to d6, which is called the Philidor's defense. Now, it's not such a popular one, mainly because it traps this bishop in here. It's what I like to call a sad bishop. It can't go very far at the moment. He's only got one other square that he can go to. White continues taking over some space in the centre by playing pawn to d4. And black now brings their bishop out here to g4. And for those that don't know about this tactic, this is called a pin. And of course what a pin is where it attacks a piece and behind that piece is something of a higher value. In this case, the queen. White now plays pawn takes here. We get, if pawn takes, we would have queen takes here like this, and this would all be very, very bad for black. They would be losing a pawn. They wouldn't be able to castle. It's not very pleasant. So the move that black chose, they thought about it, and they played bishop takes f3. Bishop takes f3. All right, we've got two choices to recapture, and when I ask students what they would play in this position, most students actually say that they would play pawn takes. And the main reason I get given is that they don't want to bring their queen out too early, which I understand. But we've got to remember that bringing the queen out early is not always a bad option. In this case, it would actually be quite challenging for black to attack that queen, so it's safe to do so. Capturing with the pawns leaves a few issues. Number one, if we were to castle on the king side, there'd be a big open space leading right down to our king. The second thing is these pawns here in the pawn structure. This is a little bit more complex, but suffice to say that this isn't great for white, especially going forwards in the game, and with the king likely to end up on that side, it's really bad. We'll get into these sorts of pawn formations. We've got what we call an isolated pawn and then a set of doubled pawns. We'll get into those in another video. Anyway, so we have queen takes instead. Much better move. And now black captures back, and white brings their bishop out here, aiming down at the weak spot, the weak square here. White is threatening to play queen takes f7, checkmate. Black puts their knight in the way, and white quickly brings their queen across to b3. And what you can see is that the queen and the bishop again line up towards this f7 square. One of the things that we want to try and do in chess is use teamwork as much as possible. In this case, the queen and the bishop form a great team, attacking down towards f7, and there is only one defender at the moment in the king. So black brings up their queen here. White is going to bring their knight out here, but they could also have just captured a free pawn down here. The reason they probably didn't do this is because they didn't want to exchange queens, although they're perfectly fine to exchange queens here. White has a number of ways to get out of the check. They're a pawn ahead. It's really quite pleasant for white. They probably thought, however, that they have better options, which is simply to try and smash black off the board. So knight to c3. Black moves this pawn up here, which means the queen on e7 can now guard both of these pawns at the same time. And white brings their bishop to g5, again creating another pin. Now with this pin, we need to think very, very carefully, because with this pin, black's turn to move, they're kind of running out of moves to do. The rook up here on h8, it's only got one square to go backwards and forwards to. The bishop on f8, well, it can't move at all. The rook on a8, it can't move. The knight on b8, it's got a couple of squares to go to, but they're not great squares to move to because of pawn structural issues that will happen or losing a pawn straight away. So black's getting frustrated, and they decide to lash out and play pawn to b5. The problem with this move is that white has a lead in development, so they've developed their pieces faster. We've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 pieces all developed. Black, on the other hand, has one piece, and we'll say a half piece. I don't think it's a fully developed piece. So we've got 1.5 pieces developed, which is a massive lead for white in development. White's also ready to castle. Black's king is stuck in the middle of the board. So white thinks about this and goes, well, I'm going to sacrifice my knight. Black says, well, all right, we'll capture that one back. And now bishop takes. Black has a few choices. If they were to block with the queen, they would lose that queen because the bishop will simply take it. If they were to block with this knight, again, they would lose their queen to the bishop on g5. Moving the king across here to d8, well, that leaves the king in the open. That doesn't look like a sensible move. So the only move left is to play knight to d7 to block. So now we've got another pin. You can see that we've got nasty pins here and also down here. It's white's turn to move. What I want you to do now is to pause your video and see if you can come up with the move that Paul Morphy played. Alright, welcome back. Who managed to find the right move? Well, there's a number of different moves that I get mentioned in classes. One of the moves that gets regularly mentioned is moving the queen to a4. Look, I like the idea. It increases the pressure on the knight down here at d7, but it's not the best move. We have queen to d3 that gets mentioned. We also have queen over here to h3 that gets mentioned. Okay, they're all pretty good moves. Another move that gets mentioned is rook to d1, and this is better than any of those queen moves because the rook is now joining in the attack and getting ready to pile up on that knight, attacking that pinned piece yet again. However, white has an even better move, and that's to castle on the queen side. And that does two things. Number one, it brings the rook to d1, which means that is aiming down towards the knight. The second thing is it gets our king into safety and keeps it safe, away, out of harm, and also allows the other rook to come across and join in. So it's kind of like a super move. It does a whole lot of things all at the same time. Black brings their rook across to this square here, getting ready to defend that knight again, and white goes, well, let's keep attacking. So they sacrifice more material. So rook takes, and then rook across to d1. Black's tangled in knots. They need to try and escape these knots. Remember, they can't play rook takes rook because of the pin here. Very, very nasty pin. It's what we call an absolute pin because there's absolutely no way that rook is allowed to move. The queen comes up here to e6, offering a trade of queens. And we could actually exchange the queens and still be better in this position if we're playing white. The sequence would go something like takes, bishop takes, removing the defender over here. And then finally rook takes here. And the rook on the 7th rank is very, very dangerous. And black's got to be careful of threats such as discovered checks from this bishop with the rook moving out of the way. For example, over here. However, white has something even stronger. So white now plays bishop takes here, check. Bishop takes rook. Black plays knight takes because the knight's not pinned any longer. But this opens up a checkmate in just 2 moves that white can now play. Pause your video and see if you can find the checkmate. Welcome back. Let's see if you have spotted that checkmate. When we're looking for a checkmate in this type of position, what we need to do is we need to look carefully and see if we can identify the squares surrounding the king where we need to cut off. At the moment, with the king on this square, what we need to do is cut off these ones here. I'm not worried about those squares because black's already got pieces on those squares. The black king simply can't go there. Now looking at these yellow highlighted squares, what pieces do we have that attacks those squares? Well, for one, we've got the bishop that aims down at these squares here. And then we've also got the rook that aims all the way down here and covers those. And what you'll notice is that the bishop and the rook line up together at one square. So imagine if you could magically transport your rook down to d8. You can teleport it down to d8. It would actually be checkmate straight away. But there's a knight in the way. Now to get rid of the knight, we have a very cool idea. We're going to sacrifice our queen by playing queen to b8. The knight now takes, and then we play rook to d8, and we have checkmate. What can we take out of this game? Well, number one, pins are very, very powerful. White used pins in those games to great effect and caused black some problems. Development of pieces. White did a fantastic job of developing their pieces. Black didn't do so much there because they were on the back foot from early on. White got their king into safety by castling. Black's king got checkmated in the middle. That's often what happens when you leave your king in the middle of the board. It tends to get checkmated. And of course, white had all of their pieces aiming towards the center of the board. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that also you've been noticing some of those little pictures flicking up on the right hand side, some of the different ideas we have coming soon, chesskid.com and all those things. Make sure you get involved in those. If you've got any questions, please make sure you contact us at info@gardinerchess.com.au. We're happy to take suggestions for videos and we'll be bringing you more videos very soon. Thank you everyone, have a great day.